Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Now we live.
Oh, now we're live. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh, I should have had my Facebook up so I could see.
Yeah, let me put my phone up and look.
Yes. So exciting to be here in the presence of these giants in the podcasting industry. We love it. Yes.
Oh, we're really on here. You know what? We all can share to our pages.
Right.
Do a watch party.
Yeah.
So fancy. So fancy. You know, Facebook is like, I love it, but it's also so, it's where all the people are. For better or worse.
There's the people with the pockets at.
Right.
That's true now.
Yeah, it's not letting me do a watch party. What's up with that?
Yeah, it's not letting me do one. Here we go. Start. Go to the Pause in Memphis page.
Okay.
And do it from there.
Gotcha.
I feel technologically unadvanced at this point because I'm like,
how do you do it, Sharkey, to share for watch party?
You go to Pause in Memphis page, go down to where it says Pause in Memphis is live now, where it's actually showing us with the live icon. Click the share button and click start. Watch together with friends, so with the group.
See, that's not even one of my.
That's not an option for me.
That's not an option for me either.
No.
I shared it like to my regular page.
Yeah, you can just share it to your page too.
Hey, maybe because I've never done a watch party thing.
I'm just out here struggling.
All right, in these technical streets.
What's up, Took?
Tevin. What's up, brother? Happy International Podcast Day to you too, dude. I am so proud of LBR, man. Like you have no idea. Like just through the roof. Like you know their journey and stuff like that. I know I'm jumping the gun. I'm sorry, but I'm just so proud of them, man. Like seriously, no lie.
I appreciate that.
Yes. I feel like so technologically unadvanced, but I want y'all to know that in my classes, you know, we now I feel like the other people in my class. I just want to say in my defense that we use Zoom and I'm very proficient in the Zoom. Okay. I just want y'all to know that. I'm just saying that to say that I cannot even pull up my Facebook to see other people watching, to see comments, to see what's happening. So I'm just out here. Like I
can't believe that tonight because you're so techie.
Yeah. Together, that's it. You know, this very personal feel because I'm literally just like, hey, I'm just on this couch right here. So
seriously, SunAh, you the techie.
I know, and I'm just out here struggling. That's why I'm behind the scenes. See, that's why I'm behind the scenes.
Okay, behind the scenes.
Producer, I'm behind the scenes, so I don't have to worry about all of this. But Sharkey has us set up, and yeah, so it's gonna be all right.
That's for sure. I do like that shirt, SunAh. That's dope.
Thank you. This was an impulse buy from Target today, but I thought it was very appropriate given the moment that we just live in.
Definitely.
Just in this moment, I felt like, yes, this is what I should wear. So all the people get this messaging. Your voice, your vote. There's only one correct vote. I'm sorry. That's it. That's all there is. There's only one correct vote right now. In normal times, you can vote for whoever you want, but not in 2020.
Right.
Just saying. All right. So shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Do it. All right. So welcome everyone to International Podcast Day. And here we are on our inaugural Memphis Swap Pod. Yes, inaugural. That means next year, September 30th, International Podcast Day. We will be coming back to you live, super live, in person live, because I'm speaking it into existence. That we will be live together for what will be the second annual Memphis Swap Pod for International Podcast Day. So I'm just letting y'all know. Y'all like how I use inaugural. I didn't say first annual. Okay, I'm getting us right.
I hear that.
I'm just letting y'all
don't
know.
come for it.
Right, exactly. I'm letting y'all know what it is, what to expect in the future, because we're already future thinking. But tonight, we have with us 4 of the biggest, longest standing, most impactful Memphis podcasts. So I'm going to introduce each of the podcasters and their podcast just to give you a little bit of insight in case you are unfamiliar with the podcast. And then throughout the evening, we, of course, are going to be talking about how each of these podcasts got started, some of their highs, some of their lows, where they're headed. And then we might try to get in their business a little bit too, because that's how we do on Verbally Effective. So just to let y'all know. But before we do that, let's get these intros going. Y'all should know I love to celebrate everything. So we're going to start with a podcast that just had a milestone 200 episodes. Y'all, you have to know 200 episodes is a major deal. So of course, you know, we are talking about the Minding Your Business podcast. Yes, we have Ron Champ Brooks in the building, your host. And so the Minding Your Business podcast is all about entrepreneurship, real estate, and of course, trending news. And I love that it is a podcast where business and lifestyle intersects. So on the Minding Your Business podcast, Ron has his MYB community, and he's dropping all those gems to everyone who is tuning in. So 200 plus. Look, let me put some respect on it. 200 plus episodes. All right. So we also have tonight here Parrish Sharkey of the Let's Be Real podcast, one of the stars. So I just want to shout out the other folks too, because you know it's a group, so it can't have anybody left out. So we have Skylar, Tevin, Trevor, Rashad, and then sometimes we have Marcus and Aston coming off the bench, getting in the rotation too. Look, oh come on, everybody! We need to shout out everybody. And correct me if I'm wrong, y'all recently had some big news too, where y'all were getting picked up on the SB Nation Grizzlies Bear podcast as well. So on that network. So yes, big happening. That's why we said we have some of the biggest and most impactful podcasts on this live pod, on this swap pod today. So, all right, by way of getting these introductions, we have Dominic Lawson of the Startup Life. Y'all, so when we were talking about milestones, this podcast started 4 years ago. Can we all just remember we were 4 years ago?
A whole different world. A whole different world.
4 years ago, it was so good. It was all good 4+ years ago when the Startup Life was just rolling out its first episode, the 30-minute episode that took 6 hours to record in the closet, which I know we'll get into the beginnings, how everyone began in a second. But on the Startup Life, Dominic gives actionable steps to the startup nation by having amazing lineup of guests who are all ranges of the business world. And I will get more into that as well. And so Dominic, 4 years in, well over 200 episodes as well. A lot of folks call him the Pod Father. Did y'all know that? The Pod Father.
I knew that. That's what we pay tribute to.
Exactly. Pod Father in the house. So if Dominic is the Pod Father, then come on, Ina Esco, the podcast queen in the building. Yes. Effective podcast, interview style podcast with folks from or in Memphis who are impacting and moving the culture forward in arts, politics, entertainment. And so 137 episodes in. So just to give you an idea, and this is just a little taste of each of these podcasts. And I would be remiss if I didn't say Verbally Effective also had some great news this year. Supposed to have been South by Southwest on the podcast stage. But you know what? COVID is a hater. So
big hater.
I swear.
Mr. COVID.
So, hey, we didn't make it to South by Southwest this year, but next year, hey, see us there. So all great news. And that's just a little bit of some of the recognition and a little bit of an idea of some of the work that these podcasters have been putting in for years. So that is what brings us together today for International Podcast Day. And today also, I just want to go ahead and put this out there. This is being sponsored by the T-Shirt Lab. You see Dominic and Ron with their T-Shirt Lab, fresh off the presses shirts. So look, all your logo needs, hit up Kelvin. Oh, Ina got hers on too. Hit up Kelvin and the
shout out to Kelvin.
Yeah, show them the back, Sharkey, for sure. Yeah, show that.
Color, looking crisp and vibrant. That's why we all love the T-Shirt Lab. And also, we have another sponsor, Roe Rogers Heating and Air. Y'all know, y'all feel that crisp air in the morning. So you know what that means. Get that all flushed out and tuned up. Right now, Roe Rogers has a special price for you all with us today. $49 for that heating tune-up. You know you're going to need it because I'm just going to let you know right now it's going to be the coldest winter ever. So go ahead and get that tune-up. The discount code is Memphis Swap Pod. All right, so let's get into it. Let me just ask you all this. Since International Podcast Day is all about the power of podcasting, what has been the power of podcasting for you?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a good question. Who going first?
You, Father.
What? Yeah, I was gonna say.
Fine. The power of podcasting for me, it really is like over the 4 years, I've come to notice that like a lot of people have stuff to say, right? But not everybody have a platform, right? And so as a podcaster, you provide this platform for people to share thoughts, share ideas, start revolutions, get out the vote, whatever it is you're trying to do, you provide that platform and you can be like seriously out here changing lives with podcasts. Like I can't tell you how many times, and I know all of you kind of get this where people email you or they send you a message like, man, that was dope, right? That was like real dope. Like, Ron had the people on from the Black Bank, One United Bank, One United Bank, right? Like, and people reaching out to him, like you're out here like impacting people, right? And even me and Ina have had the absolute honor to have both Faiza and Manira on our shows, the Verbally Effective Podcast and the Startup Life Podcast, and now Manira out here doing deals with Oprah. Like, come on, come through. You know what I'm saying? So like that, to provide that platform for people to kind of share their stories, share their ideas, inspire others. It's just it's a feeling that's just immeasurable, if I can just be honest. So that's what I think about when it comes to the power of podcasting.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback on what Dominic said. Let's just talk about like the reach for a moment. You can, with a podcast, you can reach people all over the world. We are all living in a digital space right now. And, when we take a look at our analytics from our podcast, like people in Japan are listening, people in Russia, all over the world. So you never know who will hear your message, and it's amazing. And I think that's very powerful that it has such a huge reach.
Absolutely.
Ron, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if there's much more to say after Ina and Dominic. Right. I mean, they really, tackled that and hit it right, on the head. I would add to it just the connectivity. The ability to connect with an audience. You think about this, 15 years ago, you know, how would we have connected with such a vast audience? You know, Dominic and Ina talked about, you know, internationally, how you start a podcast and you're, you know, maybe you're in a studio here in Memphis, Tennessee, or you're in your closet or wherever you are. The ability to connect and amplify your voice with people, you know, all over the world that can, you know, relate to you, can resonate with you. And, you know, like it was said, you just never know what kind of impact you can have on somebody that, you know, you may help somebody get over a hump, or you may help someone that's facing a challenge time, or even someone that's facing a joyous time that, you know, can, you know, take things even to the next level or look to help somebody else. And so oftentimes, you know, when in the early days of podcasting, sometimes it was minimalized and, oh, that's kind of a hobbyist type thing and that sort of thing. Now you see multi-million and billion-dollar companies investing in entire podcast divisions. And so there's a reason for that. And, you know, that really signifies the power of podcasting, is that connectivity.
Absolutely. Sharkey, anything you want to add?
For me, like I said, everything they said, just piggybacking off of it. Really the process, starting from the ground up. You know, we are all over 100 episodes. Ron is at 200 now. Just the process, trusting the process. All of us sticking with it. You know, we start off with a plan, and now look where we are.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. And I love Ron and Sharkey, what y'all just said, because y'all are hinting at some of those beginnings, talking about recording in the closet. And I know a few of y'all started out in the closet. No R. Kelly. Yeah, Ron, I listened to you on that episode.
No R. Kelly.
No R. Kelly. So let's just start there. Or as Ina likes to say, I'm verbally effective. Let's start at the beginning. So tell me how you guys started, and more importantly, even why you got started.
Come on, Power Father.
You go first again. Yeah. All right. Well, you know, not everybody knows this, but the podcast is actually predated by a business blog that I wrote for like a year and a half. Right. You know, I'll write a business blog, release it on every Wednesday, just talk about different things. And so, you know, when you get married, you know, you have the smarter half of you start suggesting stuff. And it was my wife, Kendra, who suggested the idea, like, maybe you should just do a podcast, you know, and she's right. You know, she's the English teacher. She understands that, like, you know, people like to listen more than they like to read stuff. And so I took that whole month of October 2016. Once again, like a whole different world from what it is where we are right now. But I took that entire month doing some research, you know, YouTube University. Shout out to YouTube University for learning everything you need to learn. That's definitely something you want to add when you're talking about starting a podcast. But anyway, YouTube University, learn how to edit, learn how to create a show format and all that other stuff. And then eventually, you know, it's like, we gotta launch, right? So November 1st, 2016 was the first episode of Startup Life Podcast. And, you know, like SunAh was saying earlier, it took me 6 hours to record. And honestly, that came from, you know, I mean, come on now. We've all been there. We trying to sound perfect. We trying to make sure we have all them ums out, you know, this, that, and the other. And so, and we actually live just south of Memphis in South Haven. So we're in that, we stay right under the flow of FedEx planes. And on that particular night, FedEx was trying to get this money, that shmoney, as Cardi B would say, right? And so there was planes all night, right? So trying to stop and record. And I really learned an important lesson about, like, you know, that, you know, done is better than perfect. You know what I mean? Because you trying to chase that perfection with the absolute perfect episode. And eventually, you know, I mean, you'll come to find out, like, nobody's going to hear you because you're still chasing that perfection. So 30-minute episode, 6 hours to record. And that's kind of where it all started, really. You know, made it to those milestones. I think when I tell people this, me personally, I didn't get comfortable. And Ron, I would love to hear what your journey is about this, you know, because the thing is, we're solo kind of dudes here in that regard. You know, everybody ain't got the magnificent SunAh you know what I'm saying, on the team, you know what I'm saying? Everybody ain't got the starting five, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, what I mean is that, like, when you're a solo podcaster, a lot of times you kind of have to figure out a lot of stuff on your own, you know what I mean? So I didn't really get comfortable with the show until about episode 30, if I'm being honest. Like, it was at that point where I was like, okay, I think I can do this. Working out a lot of kinks. But at episode 53, 54, 55, 56, I started feeling myself. I'm like, I'm dope. Okay, fam. You know what I'm saying? So, no, but you know, but it goes to show that, like, it like, you know, and Sharkey said it perfectly. It's a process, it's a journey, and you have to embrace that process. You have to embrace that journey. And boy, the doors it will open. Woo, you're come on. We talking about verbally effective on South by Southwest, man. Come through. Come on. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like it's just amazing the doors that are open, but you'll never know. And Sharkey knows this conversation. We've had this conversation many times. You will never know if you just stop or if you never get started. You'll never know the doors that open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So how did you get started? Why did you get started? Who else wants to jump in there?
I guess I'll go next. Look and get it over with. I'm going to get it over with.
Come on, Queen.
It's funny that SunAh mentioned R. Kelly as she introed this, because my absolute first podcast, I had interviewed Public Announcement on the radio. So the reason why I started podcasting is because I had been in radio knocking on 2 decades, and I was always in radio part-time, on a part-time basis. Some people thought I was there full-time, but I've always worked a corporate job and did radio on the side. And I wanted to create a show at iHeart. I wanted to interview people. I wanted to do more than just follow the programming, right? And, you know, promote what they wanted me to promote and just talk to people they wanted me to talk to. Every time I would ask, I would not get the approval. And so I had heard about podcasts, and I said, let me start my own podcast. I had all the tools available in that building, and I was not utilizing it. And so I started doing my research about podcasting. And so I first began at the top of 2018 in January, my first show. The interview I had with Public Announcement, I said, I'm going to turn this into an interview style podcast. So I'm going to use this interview I did with them. That'll be episode 1. Then I'll do it every week. And I just stuck to that. And I actually I just interviewed my friends that were in Memphis. I was like, okay, I'm going to see if they're interested in come and tell their stories on Verbally Effective. And we would talk about kind of like pop culture, things like that. And people that I was interested in reaching out to that I thought would have a wonderful story. And SunAh is one of those people that I was trolling on social media. And so I saw that she was about to be done with her doctorate and she was moving back to Memphis. And I asked her, would she come on my podcast? And she was like, sure. And so she came. And at that point, I did have a team member that handled the visuals, Jeremy Pride, Jedi Digital. Shout out to Jeremy. And so it was kind of just me and him figuring it out, because he had just picked up a camera when he joined me. And so SunAh came, did the interview. And when she left, I told Jeremy, I said, you think she would be interested in being a producer? He was like, just ask her. She probably will. Because we had found out we were sorors, you know, the whole connection right there. And so SunAh agreed, and what SunAh did for Verbally Effective is fine-tune everything. SunAh would, you know, hit me with them questions. Who's your audience? What's your mission? We have to get this down on paper. But I needed that. I needed to, you know, structure and have a foundation for Verbally Effective. And ever since SunAh has joined me, I mean, we've just gone to higher heights, you know. So that's the how and the why I started Verbally Effective. And I love you, SunAh. I appreciate everything you do.
Oh, I love you too. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. But I love have both Dominic and Ina, you know, you really talked about how y'all were doing other things very similar to what your podcast has become now. But you weren't necessarily thinking about it in a podcast format, right? So thinking about how can you open up to a broader audience to deliver that same great content, but in a different way where people can really digest it very easily and quickly on the go. And then also take control over the content that you're producing. So you can actually have kind of your stamp on it, ask the questions you want to ask, or even interview the people that you want to interview. So I love that similarity in y'all's, you know, origin stories. Come on, Ron, let's get in there.
All right, so you've got the pod father, and then you got the pod mother. So I guess I'm the capo that comes in. You know, if we're sticking with the mob theme, I'm the capo. So I come in and report, and then I go, you know, get things done. But no,
hold on, I want to just jump in here because I see we have a hater commenting. Kevin says, please stop.
Come on, Kevin. Come on, Kevin. Yeah, you can't talk about a pod father like that. That's dangerous.
It's all good. It's all good.
But thank you. I appreciate the question. And for me, you know, Dominic was a big piece of my origin story when it comes to podcasting. I knew I had an interest in it and wanting to do it, but I didn't really know how to go about it. And Dominic and I ended up connecting, and I was a guest on his show, and I saw his process and saw how he did it, saw his swag with it, and kind of, you know, the way he moved that I really admired. And that inspired me to get started, in all seriousness. And, you know, I was starting, I would be in closets, I would be in kind of side offices, you know, because at that time, kind of like Ina, I was in the corporate world when I started. So I would be, you know, in side offices, you know, recording. And, you know, the name of my show started out the I Really Mean It podcast. And I used the, you know, the old Dipset, you know, Cameron beat, the song I Really Mean It. And, you know, people love that. And then, you know, I got to a point after, you know, a few episodes like Dominic, it took me several episodes to really kind of find my groove in it. I didn't like the sound of my recorded voice. You know, I was, you know, trying to come up with content and stuff like that. And I did an episode on sexual harassment that really kind of lifted me off. This was that, if you remember that time when, you know, Harvey Weinstein, everybody was just kind of dropping like flies, Matt Lawler and all that type of thing. Yeah. And I did a really good episode, and a family member of mine in South Carolina joined the podcast and shared a story with me. She was in tears. And she shared a story with me of something she experienced on the job that I didn't know, even though I'd been visiting her and all this type of stuff. We had never had that outlet. And so that's when I knew I really had something. And so, you know, you fast forward, I changed the name to the Minding Your Business podcast, really just because I was sitting around thinking about it. And I said, you know, the I Really Mean It podcast. What the hell do I really mean? You know, and I said, you know, it doesn't tell the, you know, it doesn't give the audience, you know, what the podcast is without listening to it. Right. And so, yeah, I changed everything to the Minding Your Business podcast, just continued that pathway of kind of that intersection of the lifestyle of business. And, you know, it's taken me, like Ina and Dominic said, you know, this great journey where you know, a kid from Orange Mound that a teacher once told him and his mother that he couldn't learn, that he would, you know, I was tongue tied and that I wouldn't be able to speak well and that sort of thing. So, you know, this has a big meaning for me because, you know, if my mother standing up, you know, to that teacher and to that administration that, you know, this kid can learn just like all the other kids. And that gave me the confidence kind of all the way through. And so now to be doing my own podcast where I'm speaking and I'm doing that, you know, at a rate, you know, that I've been very fortunate to do that. It's almost like this is all house money for me. And so I would encourage everybody that, you know, you have a voice, and like Ina and Dominic said, you just never know how you can connect. And, you know, my story throughout my whole life has always been about persistence. You know, very rarely am I the best or at any one portion of anything. You know, I've always prided myself on the persistence that, you know, I'm going to always be there. I'm always be available. And, you know, I continue to put out, you know, content that, you know, always hope that the audience enjoys. And so, yeah, that's really my story, but it's been a great journey. And again, I thank Dominic, you know, specifically for his influence. And then, you know, for all of you, everyone that's here, you know, on this panel, Ina, Sharkey, SunAh, you know, you all influenced me and inspired me, even though we may not always interact and things like that. You know, I always pick up things and learn. And, that always helps me. And so, I really appreciate all of you. But, Dominic, brother, how I am about you, man. I really appreciate, that inspiration, that support. And, just, the challenging of, continuing to improve the craft over time, man, is tremendous.
Man, look, stop before I start,
you know what I'm saying? Father, you know what I mean?
Man, come on, brother.
You know what I mean? Like Michael Corleone. Coming back again.
First of all, I actually agree with two, but it's all good. We'll get to that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to say that. Go ahead.
All right, Sharkey, give us the origin story for the Let's Be Real podcast.
Okay, so one episode, I think it was like 1 year anniversary episode, Tiffany said it all started with a dream and a tweet. So that's actually true. The dream part started in 2017. I literally had a dream. I do not remember that dream to this day. I just know I woke up and said, I'm starting a sports podcast. And I game plan, kicked it off originally with me, Aston, and Savage. Somewhere along the lines, we didn't know nothing about virtual. We weren't doing none of that stuff. We was meeting in person. Our schedules weren't matching up, so it eventually turned to just me by myself. Honestly, talking sports every day, keeping up with it, it was boring. I literally created a podcast and hang out with friends. That was the whole original idea of it. So I remember I met Dominic somewhere along the lines. I got pretty frustrated. Our schedule wasn't matching, so I had called it quits in like December of 2017. The next day, Dom had actually added me. He didn't know I had told him. He added me to a podcasting group on Facebook. And really, that's one of my idea. Like, okay, don't quit. I never quit anything in life. Just reboot it with a different spin or whatever. So at that time, we were doing video on YouTube. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go audio. Then we eventually work our way back to YouTube so we can get on more platforms. Because at that time, we were just straight YouTube. And somewhere along the lines, like I said, I knew Toot back in high school. I knew Skylar since the 9th grade, our freshman year of high school. So ran to them that next summer, rebooted the podcast with both of them. That's where the tweet part comes into play. So I ran to Skylar. I told him on Twitter I need his help. He had tweeted, he saw Toot tweet something. He had tweeted Tevin, created GroupMe. Then we rebooted the podcast in summer of 2018, and we've been rolling ever since.
I love what you said about, this is what we were doing. That wasn't working. So we were doing this, and then we kind of still switched it up because podcasting, as all of you have mentioned, it is about consistency and persistence. So even if something you thought like, okay, this is what we're going to do, if it's not working, having that flexibility and saying, all right, I'll try something else, or even seeing something else that someone else is doing and say, let me just give it a shot. And if it works, and I'll incorporate it. And if it doesn't, all right, I'll still come back next week or next day, whatever your schedule is, and still put out, this next episode. Someone, Podfather once said, content is king. And consistency is that second C. So yeah, having both that content, but that consistency, and not being afraid to pivot if it's not working, and also not being afraid to try it out and kind of experiment and see what might actually work for you. So Ron really brought up a good point when he said, how he started out as the I Really Mean It podcast, but then was like, that's not really capturing what I'm doing here, and made that switch to the Minding Your Business podcast. So for the other folks, tell us how you came up with the name of your show. Parrish, let's start with you since we ended with you. How did you come up with the Let's Be Real podcast name?
So when we used to watch sports, everybody was on the show now. We know each other since college. We used to watch sports, watch NBA draft all the time. So Let's Be Real is my catchphrase. I always say that anytime something crazy happened, be like, bro, let's be real. Like that was just my catchphrase. But I originally didn't want to name the show that. I want that to be kind of like our motto. But we just couldn't think of another name. Me, Savage, and Aston spent weeks trying to think of a name and just couldn't do it. So that's how we came up with it.
I love this idea of like not letting the name stop you, because a lot of people get held up by the name. And of course, there's a lot of experts that say how you should name keywords, you know, think about SEO in mind. But I think the other thing like Ron really shows is that you can switch the name and you can still continue to grow and continue to grow your audience and get, you know, all these great accolades. So don't let the name hold you up from putting your idea out there. All right, Ina, verbally effective. How'd you come up with this name?
Well, what's interesting is that ever since a little girl, I have always been in front of an audience speaking. My grandmother, she had me in church, and I was born Catholic. I have a whole Catholic family out in Texas and Louisiana, but we went to church. We went to mass all the time. I went to Catholic school. I would read the scriptures. I would do the 12 a.m. mass on Christmas Eve. You know, I was the narrator and everything. And so what's crazy is when I hold on 1 second, like Eli, see how technology works? My son, put the TV on. Hold
on. Mama.
Damn, I fixed that.
Right. See, I didn't see that finger she had earlier.
Right.
But when I decided on verbally effective, I said, well, I know I want to interview people, and I've been on the radio this long. I was just really writing down words that to me was kind of different from everything. Because sometimes when you hear names of shows, some of them sound alike. I said I wanted something different. And so when I put those two words together, verbally effective, I said that's perfect, because, you know, I feel like that I'm verbally effective, and my guests, you know, if they're not verbally effective by the time they start on the show, they're going to be verbally effective by the time they end the show. So I ran the name across like my husband, some of my friends and family members. I can't even think of the other names, I promise, because I was so stuck on verbally effective. And everybody was like, that's it. Just roll with it. Don't even second guess it. So to be honest, I didn't spend much time on it. I rolled with it.
All right, Dominic. How'd you come up with the name?
Absolutely. So I'm, you know, just like the Let's Be Real podcast, where you can catch on all your major podcast platforms. So I absolutely love, you know, sports. And so but I always love sports shows that like it's not like highlights or whatever. Like there's like athletes have stories or whatever, right? So one of the shows I used to love to listen to was The Sporting Life with Jeremy Schaap, right? And so when I was coming up with the show name and stuff like that, I was like, oh, hold on, let me push that part out, put it in startup, because I know I want to talk to entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And then there you go, The Startup Life, right? And so I really did. You talked about SunAh, the SEO part, and the technical part, and I really took hold to that. 3 words. One of those words being a keyword, so that you instantly know, kind of like what Ron was saying earlier, you instantly know as soon as you read it, you already know what we're talking about, right? So there's no confusion or anything like that. But honestly, I don't, and I've never told that story out loud, right? It actually came from The Sporting Life, so just took sporting out, threw in startup, and The Startup Life. That's how it came to be.
All right. Look, we love an exclusive. We love an exclusive on this Swap Pod Live. So now y'all really know how this name came about. Right. For real. All right. So we know a little bit about why y'all got started and kind of how you got started. But seeing that all of you all have been in this podcast game for some years, we want some juice. We want to know, give us some memorable moments or even some times when things just didn't go as planned. So you kind of take this however you want to go, like the really high highs or the, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is what happened on this episode. Who wants to kick us off? I feel like Sharkey.
He's laughing kind of hard. So.
I know. I'm like, something popped in his mind immediately.
So we have a segment called Troll or Nah. Basically, someone comes with a troll, or if they perceive it as they're actually thinking it's not a troll, and we all determine it's a troll or not. What? It was the episode. So Ashton is a big John Wall fan. If y'all know John Wall is, he's the point guard for Washington Wizards. He is good, but he's not one of the best. He acts like he is. So we got tired of hearing talking about John Wall. And Skylar came with a troll and all saying, would you rather have? And John Wall's number is number 2. So he said, would you rather have the number 2 from Washington, which is John Wall, or the number 2 from Popeyes? Died. So Oliver chose Popeyes, of course.
Right.
That's hilarious.
Put y'all's co-host out there like that. Terrible.
Yes.
He did take care.
And this is supposed to be a podcast where you hang out with your friends. This is the type of friends this man has.
Let's be real.
Right. Exactly.
You said we chose.
I would have 2. I would have 2 too.
Right. Yeah, that number 2 is 5.
Right.
Ooh-wee. All right. What about the rest of you all? Some memorable moments, whether memorable in the good way or memorable in the OMG way. What you got?
You know what? Let me just get this out here. And I'm sure the other people on here can relate. You know, have you ever thought, like, you know, when you planning for your guests, like, oh, my guest's gonna be fine. I can't wait till they get on. And then when you start the conversation, it's not going as planned. Like, oh, this is not going good. Like, I thought they were going to be a little more transparent. Oh, why do they talk like that? What is going on?
Yep.
So I would say over my 137 episodes, I probably only had to scrap about 3 of them for those reasons that, you know, it was just a train wreck. Like, I will not disclose those guests, but it just wasn't working out. Have you guys ever experienced that?
Yes.
Man, look.
Yeah. Without question.
It wasn't true, it was them.
It's like pulling teeth, gums, hair, ears.
Exactly.
Oh, man, look.
Yeah. Yep. So I would say those were some of the memorable, like, oh, MG. And so now I guess now that look, she already knew what was up. Like, oh, wow.
But you bring up a good point, especially if you're thinking, if you have a tight schedule, right? And you may not have another episode in the can, that can really put you in a bind where you're scrambling to try to find someone or trying to think, how can you kind of work this up to make it sound maybe better than how
like, dang, I'm gonna have to edit the mess out of this one. Wait a minute. Like, I ain't got the time. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, that's me. That was mine. What about y'all, Champ and Dominic?
You want to go, Champ, or you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead, Dominic.
Sure. You know, well, since I know SunAh loves exclusive, here's another one. So, I mean, well, there's been a few, right? Like, there's that time where, you know, I got real good at GarageBand, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna make my own beat. And man, that thing was trash.
I don't want to hear it.
It was trash. I sent it to Ron. Like, hey man, what you thought about it? Ron's like, nah, bro, go back to the original.
Oh, Ron was funny.
Go back to the original. Go back to the original.
What it sound like, Ron?
See, that's a good friend. That's a good friend.
Yeah, Dominic, you needed to rap on it. That was the thing. We needed some bars.
Is that what it was? Okay. It's episode 83. But that's that one. That's that one. But
like, what happened?
Man, but to be honest with you though, and I've never told this story out loud. Episode 74, I almost quit. No, like no lie. Like I was that pod fade hit hard. You know what I mean? I was like, man, ain't nobody listening to this stuff, man. Like I don't know what's going on. So I took the summer off, was gonna reset, refocus, this, that, and the other. And I came super close to quitting. And honestly, my good friend and the sponsor of this swap pod, Roll Rogers Heating and Air, no lie, this is what happened. I seen him at our favorite chicken spot. You know, they have cows in the commercials and stuff like that. I ain't gonna say what it is because they ain't paid us.
I was like, they didn't give us no money. Ain't no free advertising.
They gave us no tick, but you know what I'm talking about, right? But I saw him because you know he services in Memphis and DeSoto County. Make sure you hit him up. But anyway, I seen him at the spot, they would like to call it, at the one in South Haven. And he was like, hey man, Dominic, what's going on? Love the podcast. Hey, and by this time I hadn't released an episode in like 3 months. And he's like, where's another one? Where's the other one? I need that other one. And I was like, man, I guess I gotta keep going. Had we not had that interaction, like no lie, Startup Life probably wouldn't be here still. Not even to be honest with you, Startup Life probably be done. Yeah. And so had we not had that interaction in the parking lot of the spot, shows probably wouldn't even be here right now. Not even gonna lie.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that. You just never know how much your words have power. I mean, we're talking about in the context of podcasting and the power of podcasting, but even on that personal one-on-one level, one person, you knew you at least had an audience of one. Right. Someone was looking for you, right? And I always take the 1 in 10 rule. If one person gives you a compliment, it's 10 other people who want to give you a compliment, but they just aren't that, type of vocal person. Right. So look, we're so glad Rogers spoke that word. Yes.
You know what? That's the thing about it. Like sometimes, when people start these podcasts, they think is anybody listening to this? Like, who is my audience really? And you kind of get discouraged, but Dominic, myself, Ron, Parrish, we are all examples of we did not let that stop us. You cannot live for the likes on Facebook and on Instagram. That's not what this is about. You have to get your content out there because you are definitely reaching somebody. You may not know who it is, but believe me, if you stay consistent, they are definitely listening to what you're saying, and you would never know who you're touching.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Your audience will find you.
Yes.
One of y'all dropped that gem on an episode too. So look, I do listen.
I think that was Champ Run. I
do listen. Your audience will find you. All right, Ron. Memorable moments.
All right. I've had so many, and Ina covered it all the way with guests and trying to pull, I've had them where I've tried to pull, personality out of them. I literally had a gentleman that was in software that gave me just 2-word answers.
No,
it didn't matter what. I could have asked him, hey, you were cured of cancer. What do you think? And he would have said, oh, great. Like that was his personality. And that's the only episode I've ever scrapped was that one, because it was just, I couldn't get nothing out of it. And finally I was like, man, do you want to do this or not? Like, come on. So I've had everything, y'all, from, I've started podcasting where I didn't have the microphone turned on. So I talked for about 30 minutes. I'm like Tupac. It was the realest thing I ever wrote. And I'm just sitting there talking. And then, oh, dang, the mic's not even on. I've had, dogs, kids, train, everything else come in the middle of episodes. I mean, I've had it all, to say the least. One of the best, more memorable episodes that I had was, and Dominic alluded to it, was when I had Terry Williams, who's her and her husband are the not only the CEOs of their bank, but they're the owners as well of the largest African American owned, managed, and controlled. And yes, it's all three bank here in the United States. And that was a tremendous, honor. She's someone that had been a mentor to me from a distance. We had never met. But her and her husband are all over the place, and so to have her and be able to have that conversation was great. Another one that speaks to kind of that intersection of kind of business and lifestyle, which that's where minding your business kind of came in. It's used as a personal phrase, right? Yeah, minding your business, right? But then it also has the business connotation. I had a lady that's near 70 in San Antonio, Texas. I had her this past summer in the height of COVID and everything going on. And it was kind of a last minute, kind of guest booking. And she's a white lady there who found out, she didn't find out she was white until she was 60 years old. All right. She grew up black. She has a black husband. She grew up she was adopted. And if you think back in the 1940s, how the adoption laws were in Texas, and her complexion kind of came off like she was, light skin, that she would be African American. So she was adopted by a fairly well-to-do African American family. And, so that really honed in that conversation of, what people always expected from me, from my banking background, to always talk about finance and always talk about economics and things like that. And I always wanted to push against that box that people knew me as, to talk about lifestyle. And so her conversation of, what that was like growing up believing that she's a Black woman, only to find out in her more senior years that she's actually a white woman, right? And she didn't go change all her life, but she had a whole story that was being written about it. And, you know, I came up with questions kind of on the fly. You know, I know Dominic, you know, Parrish, you know, everybody just does a great job of preparing for episodes. I wasn't prepared for this at all. I went into it completely. I was going to ride with whatever she said. And when I was I even shocked myself at the questions that I was coming up with as she was speaking and telling her story, which was really amazing. And I got great feedback, you know, from that episode. And so that was really another high moment for me, was having a conversation on, you know, a podcast again, where people sometimes would expect me to talk about, you know, business loans and, you know, the stock market and, you know, spreads and all that type of stuff. But to talk to a woman who, you know, again, in her senior years, you know, and still sitting there with a Black husband that she loved, and she had, you know, Black family members and, you know, all that type of thing. And, you know, for her to come to that, you know, awareness and share her story, you know, on, you know, my little podcast was just tremendous.
Amazing.
Wow.
That's wild.
I gotta listen to that. I want to know when and why did she find out she was white?
Oh yeah, it'll blow your socks off. I can go back, I can remember that episode, but yeah, you think it's not like you're finding out when you're, you know, a kid. You know, you're finding out when you're senior, you know, your kids have all grown up, you're at the back half of your life. And then to find out, I mean, imagine anybody here watching this or any of y'all, you know, what if y'all just, you know, found out you were a different race than what you know, right? It was just tremendous. But yeah, no, I appreciate that question. It was you know, some great highs and lows that I've had for sure.
Look, yes, I know everyone is going to want to check out that episode. So that's Minding Your Business podcast on all streaming platforms. So definitely you'll have to check that one out. And you bring up a good point, which is these guests that sometimes surprise us. So what have been either some guests or even some topics maybe that have surprised you in the process of you even recording? You didn't think it was going to go this way, but the conversation, you know, went somewhere else, or you were really just shocked to learn, you know, what this person had to share or the level of vulnerability that they really had. So was there a guest or even a topic where you're like, wow, this didn't go how I thought, but it went, you know, even better, you know, than I would have ever imagined?
For sure.
I'll go. Not necessarily, I think. So put it this way. So Sheedy, Rashard Riley, Sheedy, he got added on as our 5th member. When he came onto our podcast, he came on as a guest. And when he came on as a guest, he blew me away. He blew all of us away. I know Scout, he was friends with Scout. Scout is like, man, bring him on. We had other guests before, some of our friends that we had on. I mean, they were good, and we ain't trying to say like nothing bad about them, but like Sheedy kind of like, it was different. It was like, wow. And it may have been because he's not from here. He's from Ohio. So it just came from just a different perspective. And it was I just knew at that point, I was like, hey, we might have found our 5th member. And after that, he wanted to come on. It was kind of like he kept coming by, like, like he was in the back while we were recording. He just sitting there, like, it just came mutual, like, yeah, we gonna bring him on.
Oh, I love that. It just all came together.
He's a natural too. I have to admit that, like, he's really good. Like when he talks about, I mean, they're talking sports and stuff like that, but it's like you can hear it in his voice. It comes from a very authentic place, and he's very knowledgeable about what he does. So I can definitely attest to that.
Yep.
Well, you know what? A lot of the episodes that are very surprising to me. For one, let me say this. In this podcast game, there are not a lot of women. This is a male-dominated industry, and especially for Black women, there are not a lot of Black women in this space. So when I have guests that are women, I appreciate it so much because for some reason, men, I can get them like that. They're always agreeing, but women, for some reason, it takes a little pulling and tugging to get them to agree on an interview. Like I'm thinking in my mind, oh yeah, I probably could get, but when I talk to them, it may be a no, you know, and then I'll try again. But a lot of the women that come on the Verbally Effective podcast that share so many struggles that they've gone through and that I can relate to, it's just amazing to me. And then, we get to vibing and it just be a whole woman kumbaya on the Verbally Effective podcast. So some of the women that I can think of, Anna Mitchell with Royal Studios, Cynthia Daniels, Jessica Benson with Grind City Media just recently. There have been so many women on the pod. London Lamar, she really broke some things down for me. It's just, like I said, it's amazing to be able to relate to someone on so many levels and share some of the same, stories of struggle and triumph on a podcast. So a lot of the women, I love the men, I salute the men, but the men, is almost 99.9%. They're going to agree to come on the show and share their story. But women, and I found this over the last 2.5 years, they're not always open to being so transparent and open and really tooting their own horn, talking about their journey, talking about, yes, I'm successful now. And I just hope and pray that going forward, these women will come on the Verbally Effective podcast and share their amazing journeys with us.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Dominic.
Michael Brody Waite is an entrepreneur that we had on the show. Very knowledgeable. He built very successful healthcare business. This is the Memphis Swap Pod, so it's that city east of us, not too far, about 200 miles. I'm not gonna say what it is, but whatever, right? But anyway, he very successful in the healthcare space. But he was also an addict, right? We are in this era of a lot of people, going through, addiction and stuff like that. And so we were talking business in the beginning of the episode, but it just kept coming out about, his journey, about, and continues to this day, right? One of the things he shared with me is like, because he still goes to meetings. There is no sense of like, once you, kick an addiction that you don't go to meetings, you're still whatever. Right. And so it just kept seeping out that like he wanted to advocate for people who go through that. Right. Because the book that he was promoting at the time talked about how, people who go through that make great entrepreneurs because you can't go through adversity and stuff like that. But it got to a point in the episode where I was like, come on, like clearly, like this is something that you're passionate about. Like, tell me something about people who go through that people not only don't know, but need to understand. And the podcast just took did a complete 180 and like the whole tone changed. But like, it's probably the most powerful 7 to 8 minutes like in the history of my show. Right. Like, because like the way he just expressed that, how, people who go through that is not a situation of like, they just want to just, go down that path. Like they want to be better. They want to get that help, but like, it is hard. Right. And so when I hear somebody who wants to advocate for something, business or not, we're going to go through there because, and I think that's what I want to kind of share with new podcasters. Sometimes you go into that show with a set plan, a set goal, but sometimes that content just goes in a different direction and you got to follow it. You just got to follow it because, whether it be on the board of, what the show is going to be about, it's probably about to be something magical on the other side. So you got to follow that. But that episode with Michael Brody Waite, after that part of the show, I was like, hold on, man, we got to pause, man, because that was a lot. That was emotional. Like, first, and I was like, thank you. I even talked to his PR person that set up, and she was like, that's probably one of the best episodes he's ever done, like easily, hands down. So that's probably one that like really sticks out to where it was going to go one way, plan to go one way, and it just went a completely different other way. And it was just like I said, probably the best 7, 8, 9 minutes in the history of my show.
Wow.
Oh, I love that. You know, once again, I know folks will definitely want to hear that episode. So you can tune into the Startup Life wherever you stream podcasts, also on the Binge Network. And also, what markets are you in? I'm sorry, I failed to say that. Come on, where how many cities are you in?
We're in 10 different cities. That includes the UK as well. We're on Podcast One as well, right up there with, T.I. and Stone Cold Steve Austin and his show and stuff like that. And we just recently got added to Apple Podcasts UK that we're pretty excited about. So, yeah, we trying to expand a little bit, just a little bit.
All right, Startup Nation. Yes, we love it. I love this idea of being flexible and being able to respond to your guests in real time, right? And being able to tap into that magic of what happens when you let go of the script, right? And really let your guests say what's on their heart and what they're passionate about. And that really creates these moments where it's like, wow, that was a really powerful episode. So I think that's just a good tip for people to think about, like making sure you are flexible and being responsive to your guests. So I see we have a question, and I want to acknowledge the question, which says, how do you go about getting on different platforms? And maybe Dominic, you could go ahead and talk about this, since you are in all these different cities, right? All these different outlets.
Right. So, first of all, Nikki Woods, thank you for watching. A great question. It's a numbers game, right? So when you talk about the podcast platforms, that's kind of easy. You submit it to a podcast platform, and this, that, and the other. But when we talk about radio and stuff like that, it's a numbers game. So I'm in 2 different markets, radio markets, but I sent out at least 400 emails, right? And so basically what you want to do, you want to get a nice pitch together, a nice email pitch, or if you want to call on the phone, that's fine too. But either way, you want to get together a good pitch. You want to say, hey, this is who I am. This is my show. This is what it's about. And then really start to talk about what value your show can offer your network. And especially if there's a radio network or a podcast network that's probably having that void of what you bring, then clearly that's an easy puzzle piece fit. Right. But really sell the show. Right. And this is where you get the scaling, the show scaling and bringing in a new audience, a new type of guest if you're an interview style pod. But it honestly is reaching out to people, create that sales list. Me and Champ Ron, we come from the banking world. We know all about creating that sales list. Ina as well, that corporate, you got to put that corporate America in that pod a little bit. You know what I mean? But that's how you get started, and don't be afraid of the no's, right? Just keep reaching out, keep emailing, keep making those phone calls. And eventually some of those people are like, you know what, we might be interested. And even if they don't say yes right then and there's been plenty of times where they'll come back a few months later, like, you know what, I think we may have a spot for you, and if they say it's at midnight on a Sunday, you take it. You absolutely take it, because if anybody's willing to give you a spot on their network, it may not be prime right then and there, but they may move you around and say, hey, let's put you in a prime spot. And really quickly before I kind of shut up, some spots may say you need to pay to get on their spot, and some people may say, no, I'll just have it on for free. And so that's up at your discretion if you want to do that. But make sure it's a great fit for you. Make sure it's a great fit for them. Always think win-win. Always think win-win.
Mm-hmm. Dominic, I mean, as I'm listening to you talk, the distribution to just like your iTunes or Spotify or Spreaker, iHeart, that's pretty easy, right? Because that's free. Right. But getting into these radio markets is a totally different ball game. But it really comes down to something that Ina said previously, which is tooting your own horn.
Big facts.
Being, vocal about your reach, your audience, and the value that you provide, which is really what all of you all have been able to to do so well, which is to create content that's valuable to your audience, right? And continue to expand. Podcasting, like any other kind of business, is word of mouth, right? As people love the content that you're creating, then they tell their friends to tune in, and it is very much often an organic growth, right?
For sure.
So there's that piece of it as well.
And if I could add one more piece to it as well, because the thing is that, like, you know, obviously you grow that audience, but you also, once you grow that audience, you know what comes? That's money. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but look, let's be honest. Like, a lot of people get into podcasts. I mean, don't get me wrong. They love the craft. They love what we do. They love the industry, stuff like that. But people trying to, like, you know, you do this thing to monetize. You know what I'm saying? So that's a way to monetize it. That's the way you bring in big name guests. You get them sponsors involved and the whole nine. But you're absolutely right, SunAh. Like, I'm not saying like going there like I'm the best thing ever. But, you know, put some Memphis swag in that pitch. You know what I'm saying? Like, let them know, like, I'm dope. You know, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 100%, you know, energy every single episode. And they want to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love you said that Memphis swag.
Memphis swag, man.
Since we are here on the Memphis Swap Pod for International Podcast Day, what I want to know is, how has Memphis, the culture, the attitude, the grit and grind, how has Memphis, being raised in Memphis, I'm not going to say from, because I know a couple of y'all ain't really from here. But I'm just saying. But how has Memphis, being from Memphis or being in Memphis, really shaped your podcasting?
That's a good question. So now I'll start off. You know what, Memphis, and I'm one of those people she was talking about, transplant from Beaumont, Texas, but I have been here since 1995, and I have not left Memphis.
Well, you ours now, so
right.
That's what people from Memphis say. Well, you from Memphis now.
You from Memphis now, so you belong to us.
Right. You know what, Memphis, just living here since 1995, I mean, you're gonna have to grind it out in Memphis. Nobody giving you nothing in Memphis. This is one of the ride or die cities, hardcore. I think Memphis is a training ground for some of your greats in any field. I mean, I can't, like Dominic said before, like, don't get discouraged by no's. I've heard 1 million and still counting no's. You're going to get that, you know, but I think Memphis is a town that builds character. If you stay persistent, like Champron said, and be consistent at what you're doing, Memphis is just one of those cities. People are going to give you the real. It's not going to be easy. Memphis is not easy. Nobody's giving you anything. Nope. Right. Like I said, this is a training ground for the greats here in Memphis. It's like they say, the city of grit and grind, and that translates into some of the stories you'll hear on Verbally Effective as well with the audience. With my guests as well. And you hear their stories, and it's amazing all of the things that they went through just in this city. This city in Memphis, Tennessee is something serious, and it's still something serious, but I love it. I love Memphis. It has been very good to me. You know, me from little old Beaumont, Texas. So I love Memphis 10, and it's the city of grit and grind. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
Beautiful land in the world.
Right.
Memphis. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Who else wants to jump in there? How has Memphis shaped your podcasting?
Yeah, I'll jump in. For me, even, being based here in Memphis, and kind of like Dominic having guests kind of all over, having guests from all over, in different fields. One of the things that I found that really hit me about, like, dang, Memphis, culture, kind of like Ina said, it spreads all over. I was at a banking conference. People, know me that I've got my bank consulting practice, and I spend a lot of time when there's no pandemic traveling. And I was actually up in kind of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where there's no one that looked like any of us on this swap pod. And there was a gentleman that walked by. He's the CEO of actually Mercantile Bank, which is up there in that Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Guy's worth several million, a few times over. We pass, and he kept looking at me. And I was wondering, okay, well, what he looking at me for? What he want? I ain't got nothing for him. And, got twice my age, and up there looking at it, like, oh, wait a minute, man. But yeah, right there. Yeah. And so he comes over and he said, "Is this you?" And he's got, my logo up on his phone. I said, "Well, yeah, that's me." He's like, "Man, I listened to your podcast."
Wow.
It's like, man, that's just crazy. That's why I was looking at you, because you look just like this dude, that's on this podcast. Because I've got the cartoon character, on there, kind of like Ina, on my logo. And so, he was sitting there listening. Now, this is a guy that's leading a bank in Upper Peninsula, 1,500 miles from me. I'm a guy half his age, black guy, African American, sitting down here in Memphis, Tennessee, and he's sitting there listening to a Memphis-based podcast. Guy that's got, way more money, way more, he's up there speaking at this conference. Everybody knows him. But then he's familiar with me even before I'm familiar with him. So it goes back to what we were saying earlier about that connectivity. You never know who you reach. But for someone like me that was 17 years in banking, I go to bank conferences now, and they know me for the podcast I've been doing for 3 years before they even know me as being a former banker. They think I'm just, there like I'm a podcaster. And that's tremendous. And, for them to, respect and kind of show that love, to Memphis. I always get, positive, feedback and vibes, not only to the podcast, but just, about Memphis. Right. And so, that Memphis flavor obviously is embedded. I'm a bit of a transplant too, although I'm native Memphian. I was born in Chicago.
You ours too.
Yeah. So I'm definitely a Memphian. Grew up here, everything. But that Memphis flavor is embedded. Even as I talk to people internationally, I always make sure, like you say, that grit and that grind. Memphis is a southern city with a little bit of kind of Midwest kind of grit. People work very hard here, and like Ina said, no one's given anything. It's not LA. If you go out to the West Coast, it's a little sometimes a little soupy, and that sort of thing. It's got different challenges, but sometimes, everybody, come on in, that sort of thing. And Memphis isn't like that. Memphis, you got to work, but I love it. And I've lived on both coasts, right? I've lived in Seattle. I've lived in DC. There's nothing like Memphis. And there's no place like Memphis. There's no place with the type of soul. Some places, there's a lot going on, and you think just because there's a lot of places you can spend money, it's great.
Facts.
But few places have the soul like Memphis. And, I just encourage, like Dominic was saying, podcasters to keep that, if you're from Memphis and you represent Memphis, keep that as part of, the soul of your podcast. And, and be true to yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't try to be Joe Budden. Don't try to be Joe Rogan. Don't try to be Whitney, whatever, these celebrity podcasts. Don't try to be them. Be you. And, like I've always said, you're the very best you that will ever exist. And so, be yourself in your podcast, and it goes so much further.
True.
Definitely.
Thanks.
All right, Dominic and Sharkey, how has Memphis influenced your podcasting?
You want to go, Shark?
Sure.
Okay.
All of us, with the exception of she, the other 6 of us are all from Memphis. 5 of us graduated from the University of Memphis, so we never left the city. So yeah, our podcast is straight in Memphis all day. We played that Memphis clip so many times on our podcast. We kick off our shows talking about anything Memphis related most of the time, because a lot of information going on. But it's all Memphis. We all came. Most of us came from the background, grew up in the hood. I grew up in the Haven. So I think we just all came collectively as one, and it's all worked out.
All right, Dominic.
Let me explain to y'all why I love this city. So right now I'm binging a lot of like wrestling podcasts, right? I don't know why. Like that's the thing with podcasts, right? You'll find a niche and you'll just get lost in it. And you gotta find all the podcasts, right? That's related to that. So right now I'm in a wrestling or whatever, right? And Ron hit it, on the head. Like there is so much soul in this city. Ina, you had a young lady from Royal Studios, Royal Radio, I can't remember. And she said the same thing, like how much people envy the soul and the swag of this city. So Do y'all know like how, you know, when you watch WWE and have like the music and the ring entrances and the crazy promos? Tell me why it was the Memphis wrestling market that started all that.
Yeah,
like that started like the people weren't doing that. I didn't know that until recently. Like people weren't doing like the big time promos with, you know, stuff like that. And then you think about The Rock and the Macho Man with like, ooh, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like all that kind of like worked itself out here in this city.
Yes.
So I say all that to say that like there is just something special about, you know, about this city, you know, the talent in this city is just like, you know, and I think sometimes we take it for granted, you know, how much talent is just truly in this city. But, you know, it's crazy. Like I'll talk to a Fortune 500 CEO and we'll drop 3 mains in 30 seconds. Right? You know, like we can talk EBITDA, we can talk economies of scale, but I like, man, you need to run me my money, man. So, you know, like to this, you know, this billionaire CEO, you know what I mean? But, you know, but it goes back to something SunAh was saying early, like, you know, or was SunAh was saying this earlier, like being comfortable with yourself, being comfortable with what you do, being comfortable with, you know, who you are, and really just throwing all that energy, that self-actualization, throwing all that into your podcast, you know what I mean? And people will resonate with it. I can't tell you how many times, because like the thing is, like the people that we bring on our show on the Startup Life, you know, I'm competing with Good Morning America, I'm competing with CNBC, I'm competing with the Today Show for these guests, right? And so they was like, man, I just love your flavor. I just love your style. I love your flavor. Like I don't feel so uptight, you know, like, you know, when I'm on, like, cause like when I'm on Good Morning America, I got to be like, you know, right? Like when I come on the Startup Life, like, man, like, you know, I can crack open a beer, you won't care, you know.
Yeah,
you know, but I think, you know, people just love, you know, like Champ Ron said, the soul that we have. There's a lot of places like that place, you know, 200 miles east of us. Like it is a very transient place, right? But they don't have the soul that we have. They don't have the swag that we have. They don't have whatever that we have, that grit, that grind, that whatever that is, we have it. I don't know if it's because we on the Mississippi or what, but like it's just something about this place that we just have, and we bring it to the forefront, and it can't, you know, it's awfully, you know, people try to like duplicate it, but it ain't the same. We know imposters when we hear them, you know what I mean? Like, you know, Terrence Howard, but anyway, you know,
right.
We know imposters when we hear them, you know what I mean?
Right.
Absolutely. I mean,
and you know, so I wanted to add to that point. Actually, there was a point that Ina made earlier that I think, you know, we need to make sure we bring out with this is with women. I've run into the same thing with women. You know, Dominic talked about talent. There are a lot of talented men, of course, but there are a lot of talented women. And, you know, I think, you know, particularly in the podcast space, and, you know, I love to echo and kind of piggyback what Ina said earlier about, you know, that talent of women and to get into podcasting. And listen, I understand that, you know, sometimes speaking out with your voice where it's kind of unfiltered and unblocked, you know, you can't really put privacy settings on your podcast. Right. And so, and I understand people work corporate jobs and, you know, they want to be careful about the supervisor and the boss and that sort of thing. But one of the things that I've found, and, you know, for someone coming from an industry like banking, like Dominic and Ina, everybody knows it's ultra conservative, you know, very by the book. You know, I'm helping some of them start podcasts even now. And so, you know, the world's kind of opening up to, you know, that blend of, again, you know, kind of your lifestyle to your business. It's not like it was in the past where a company expects you to live and breathe and eat, you know, just that company and you can't do anything outside. And so a lot of times your company might be a little more open to, you know, what you do kind of away from that, even in your podcast, than you may think. And so, you know, I encourage you to, you know, amplify your voice. And I think Ina made a great point with that, that I wanted to make sure we brought out, because it's tremendous. And like Dominic said, there's so much talent, and a lot of women should be comfortable and feel open to be able to speak out and, you know, have that same confidence, you know, like Dominic was saying, to go and speak to, these companies and promote your podcast and share just how dope you are, because everyone on this is dope. All of you out there are dope in your own way, and you have a voice.
Absolutely. As I'm listening to what you all are saying, a lot of it ties into how you've been successful, right? So one, claiming and being very explicit about your Memphis roots or that Memphis flavor, right? And not trying to downplay that, or not trying to, put on this kind of alter ego in the podcast, but instead bring all of your experiences, whether it's business, personal, or just being in the culture of Memphis, bringing that to the podcast. And that's really what separates your podcast from someone else's, right? So that piece of it. And I know there are probably people who are listening or who will listen to this on the replay who are thinking about jumping into the podcast world. So I'd really like for you all to talk about, what do you think has helped make you successful in podcasting?
I think everybody got that face.
Right. Well, let's be honest. Like, everybody here has at least 100 episodes, so that's a long journey. So there's probably so many of those little small things that maybe we took for granted at the time that we're like, man, I didn't even think about that. You're thinking about. So yeah, I guess I'll kind of start. I think for me, I think the most important thing that I can lend, to say that kind of why we've gotten to this point is, honestly, and it's going to sound a bit redundant, but it's not being afraid to ask. Like, not being afraid to ask. Like, look, man, it's like, I was told no as a kid when I wanted my favorite candy bar. I was told no. Plenty of times that girl in high school you wanted to date, like, nah, fam, you straight. You know what I'm saying? and so, like, after a while, you hear no, and it's like, it ain't as scary. You know what I mean? We say on the show all the time, no is an acronym for next opportunity. You know what I mean? So maybe there's something around the way. Like I said earlier, like, yeah, we're in 10 radio markets, but we've sent so many emails, so many phone calls, and I'm still phone calling, I'm still emailing, you know what I mean? But throw that shame, whatever that is that comes with knowing that shame you feel, put that in the trash, you know what I mean? And so I think that's probably, to me, the biggest thing is just not being afraid to ask. And if somebody say no, it's like, all right, well, guess what? When I write this memoir, I ain't gonna forget. Right. I'm kind of petty in that regard. I'm powered by petty power a little bit. And so it's like when you said, oh, not good enough. Okay. You just made the list. Gotcha.
And I took that personally.
Right. I did. Right? Like, I'm a Scorpio. I may or may not have a little bit of the mama mentality in me. So it's like, I take it personal. I take it a little personal. So
yeah, I saw that Facebook post, little podcast. I said, uh-oh.
Man, look.
that little podcast. That little podcast in 10 radio markets.
Right. Okay.
All right. Other folks want to chime in. What has made you successful?
You know what? I think for verbally effective is the consistency and utilizing your resources. Like I said, when I started Verbally Effective, I was in an actual radio studio, in the iHeart studio. Use my resources by starting with what I had. Use your resources with your guests. Promote. That's the only way you're going to get it out there. Promote. Ask your guests to promote the show that they are being a guest on. Like, put it on your socials. I'm gonna put it on my socials, and we just gonna circulate this thing. We got to get it out there. Just constantly expanding on what you have as well. That has worked very well for the Verbally Effective podcast, because we start just audio. We've tapped into the visuals with the YouTube channel, live shows, virtual forums, Podbox started to create a community of podcasters. Then came some TV, then came South by Southwest. I'm telling you, once you get started, you never know about the opportunities that will come your way. You know what I'm saying? So consistency, and like Dominic said, don't be afraid to open your mouth. I promise I am going to ask you what I want. And if you say no, I'm just going to move on to the next person, because you have to keep it moving, because you never know. You're going to get a yes eventually. You're definitely going to get a yes. And yeah, I'm gonna stop right there. I go on and on. Okay.
Yeah, I could jump in, with that and following what Dominic and what Ina said. I'd say two words: fear and flexibility are things that have helped, for me to be successful, and I think other podcasters to be successful. As it's been said, fear is one of the biggest challenges. It can cripple. Whether it's fear of going for that opportunity, like Ina mentioned, the fear of and people that have watched the Social Dilemma now are talking about that on Netflix, about the fear of getting caught up in likes and shares and follows. And one of the things that I learned fairly early on in my walk, and it comes from playing ball and sports, even up to the college level, was when great basketball players that are shooters, when they miss shots, they spend time on the form, the mechanics, the basics, right? They don't go and start counting how many they make and miss. What they make sure they do is, even if they are making shots, I've been around Ray Allen. Ray Allen, he can make 20 shots in a row and not feel good about his shot if he doesn't have the right mechanics. And so not being fearful to go back, to the basics, when you feel that you have to, not being fearful to have that conversation. Listen, everybody, that you talk to, that's a human being with warm red blood, you can look at eye to eye, and you can have a conversation, that's professional. And so not having a fear of that, not having a fear of, what something may completely look like or what you may miss. One of the things I get asked about, and Dominic and I, we've had this conversation, is, about the whole live thing. And people ask me, Ron, aren't you afraid of doing your podcast live? And, you may slip up and do this and do that. And I said, well, that one of the great things about podcasting is there's so many different ways you can do it your way. Right. There's no, Ina could probably speak to this, and SunAh probably too, that, on the corporate side of kind of like sometimes TV and radio, there's, it can be scripted and maybe sometimes a little more rigid. You may not have that flexibility, although sometimes you may. With podcasts, you completely have that ownership. And so, don't be fearful of utilizing that flexibility for however you want to connect and go to market. And so that's something that's always, helped me. And keep that mindset. And I think that'll help, new and existing podcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharkey.
So SOS, like I said, I have a team. So one of the things, our motto is consistency is key. And we adopted that motto. I forgot what episode, Scott. Matter of fact, it was the same episode, the Popeyes, number 2. He said consistency is key. That's why he preferred Popeyes over John Wall. But for the episode, that's been our motto. Just my growth as a leader, like I said, it's 5 of us, sometimes 7, most of the time 6. Because Savage has been on pretty much all of this year. And just for me, knowing how to manage, we only talking no longer than an hour and a half. That's a lot of voices, 6 different people, trying to find out different ways of how we could cut off, lessen us cutting each other off in different segments. I've learned to start assigning different segments to different people instead of me having to do all the research and, killing myself trying to do everything. All right, hey, Trevor, you take over NBA. Scott, you take over NFL. It's kind of helped and just helped, like I said, the whole team camaraderie, us having that chemistry and knowing kind of what the other person is feeling and thinking, and we kind of just work off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love everything that you all said. So I'm just going to list it again just for people who may have missed some of it. So like Sharkey said, delegate if you have a team. So thinking about delegating. Consistency is key, which is something that I think almost all of you have touched on throughout this evening. Fear, don't be afraid to go back to the basics. Refine your techniques if you need to. Stay flexible. You have to start. I think that's the most important thing. You have to start. You cannot get to episode 200 unless you start at episode 1, right? And then keep that consistency going. promote. So again, not being afraid to toot your own horn, to tell people, open your mouth and tell people what you are doing. Utilize your resources, whatever they may be. Don't be afraid to ask. Another key that we have kept hitting on throughout this evening, don't be afraid to ask. And then earlier, at the beginning of our time together, Dominic mentioned YouTube University. So once again, what resources you have at your disposal, use them. And I love the fact that here we have 4 podcasts that are well over 100 episodes, multiple years in the game. And I asked you what has made you successful, and nobody said anything about equipment. It wasn't about a microphone. It wasn't about a headset. It wasn't about, a camera. It wasn't about this platform or that platform for distribution, right? And so for folks who are listening and are, again, still maybe thinking about if they want to start a podcast or thinking about, no, I can't because XYZ, no one said anything about anything financial. If you have a phone, you can podcast. Yes. And I know for some of you on here tonight, that's how you started, with a phone. Yep. And then maybe later on got an external microphone for your phone, right? Yep. Not even thinking about the whole setup. So I just want folks to be encouraged that you don't need all this fancy equipment. Start where you are with what you have.
Yes. There it is. Yep. Yes.
All right.
That was
right. That was dope. That was real dope.
Yes, I'm just listening, being responsive to the folks I'm talking to. All right, so let me know this. We want to know what's next. What's next for you in this podcast and your own podcast? But then also think about, what do you think is next for podcasting, overall?
Yeah.
Ooh. I'll go first. I'll go first to kind of get this kicked off. I think for me, honestly, there's not too much there. I mean, there's not like a big thing that I'm trying to attain. It's really just trying to reach more people, right? We've gotten. I'm definitely trying to get a little bit more coverage, in that East Coast market, that Southeast market. A little bit. I'm basically in all the corners as far as radio. I'm trying to get into that Southeast corridor, Southern Alabama, Northern Florida kind of area, stuff like that. But as far as podcasting goes, as a whole, well, I'll take it podcasting as a whole and podcasting here in Memphis. Right. And why we decided to do this swap pod and stuff like that. Unless I'm jumping the gun, SunAh, shut the hell up, Dominic.
No,
okay?
Go for
okay.
it.
All right. But, but podcasting as a whole, I mean, I know, honestly, and Ron kind of alluded to this earlier, we're seeing a lot of celebrities and stuff like that. They can't do like comedy shows or whatever the case may be, and they're starting podcasts and stuff like that. And so, and what I don't want to see, what I would like not to see happen, is people get discouraged and thinking like, oh, I got to be a celebrity to start a podcast. Like, throw that idea, take it, ball it up, put that in the trash today, right? Because the thing is that, like, just because you don't have that name recognition, you can beat, you can still succeed in other ways, right? The celebrity don't have all that stuff at their disposal either, right? Like, they have a name, sure, but you can beat them in other ways. So there's that. But as podcasting as a whole, I see, when we start talking about the business side, we're seeing, Spotify out here making big moves. They got Joe Rogan now, they got the Michelle Obama podcast, and stuff like that. I'm seeing a lot of places like your Spotify's and your Pandora's, there are, and radio stations looking into getting into podcasting and stuff like that, because I think they see like, oh, this is serious now. And me and Ron, we talk about this all the time. Like, when there's two inflection points that I think about. The first one was when Spotify bought Gimlet. I was like, Ron, this is getting serious. Right. Like, because now corporate America is starting to see this podcasting thing is not only going away, it's lucrative. Right. But also, too, like I said, radio stations are looking for this. But also, once again, Spotify again when Joe Rogan got that $100 million deal, once again, like corporate America is paying attention, right? Because I know a lot of people was like, oh, he got that $100 million because he's a celebrity. No, Joe Rogan got that $100 million because he been making content for 17 years.
Put in that work.
Right. He been making content for 17 years. Right. And so, you know, what I'm saying now, like, and honestly, that $100 million deal was good for all of us. That was good for all of us, not just Joe Rogan. That was good for all of us, because what those two deals are saying, it's solidifying the industry. It's telling you this is the next wave. Radio is starting to get on board, and everybody needs to, you know, start throwing marketing dollars, you know, at that way. I talked recently to a professor at MIT. He's all about social media, one of the preeminent, you know, social media experts in the world, right? And he's saying that, like, you know, a lot of advertisers and big brands are not going after the Kim Kardashians to promote brands anymore. They're going to these small micro influencers, 1,000 followers, 1,500 followers, because there's more engagement, right? You could pay Kim Kardashian $500,000 to promote your brand, but the ROI is actually higher with micro influencers because of that engagement. So if you're listening out there and you're thinking about starting a podcast, don't, you know, and I know we probably gonna get to this later, but I'm just gonna say it now. Do not worry about downloads. Do not worry about downloads. There is money out there to be made if you're trying to monetize this thing to be that micro influencer. Engage with your audience. Engage with them. Let them know that you're there for them and stuff like that. And last point, when it comes to this beautiful land in the world that we call Memphis 10, you know what I'm saying? There is so, and I said this earlier, you know, there's so much talent here. There is so much freaking talent here. And you add the world of podcasting with it, man, look, when I think of Memphis, you know, one of the things that I've always had an affection for is late 90s, early 2000s Atlanta hip hop, right? You know, and I was in Richardson Towers bumping, you know, Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, but the thing is that, like, there's so much talent here, and you add the beauty of podcasting with it, you know, we could be, honestly, that you know, in the podcasting game, we can be what Atlanta was, that 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002. We could be that for podcasting, you know, which is why we wanted to do this swap pod. We're trying to get more and more people in this city in the game, because, like, I don't think y'all understand, like, people y'all listening out here, there's so much freaking talent in this city, and we can take this podcasting thing to the next level. We could be the epicenter for podcasting. Nobody has more swagger than us. Nobody has more talent than us. Nobody has more soul than we have in this city.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is just one part of that movement of not competing, but collaborating.
Absolutely.
And creating that community.
Because that's what they did in Atlanta, right?
Yes.
They was on everybody's other thing. Sorry, I mean to cut you off, but they was on everybody's stuff. But go ahead, SunAh. That's how I just want to get that
yes.
point.
No, that's exactly right. Once again, thinking about what resources do you have, and we have each other, not only folks who are here right now on this panel, but also other podcasters in this city as well. We have each other where we can actually share information, you know, pump each other up. And that's really what we're trying to do as well with our Facebook group of pods in Memphis, is to create that community. And that's what I know Ina has tried to do with Podbox, with, again, creating that community of podcasters, no matter where you are in your podcast journey, whether you're at episode 1 or at episode 100, but still learning from one another. So absolutely. All right. Other folks want to jump in. What's next for you, for your podcast? And then what do you think is next for podcasting, the big podcasting industry?
I'll take a stab at it. What's next for me is planning to grow Ivy Multimedia. So that is the mothership, Ivy Multimedia. And under Ivy Multimedia, we have 3 podcasts. So Verbally Effective is the first. Then there's A Difficult Beauty with SunAh and myself, talking to the women. And third and lastly is I Pledge the Grind. This is the podcast about how people are making pivots during this season of creativity, like I like to call it, with COVID-19.
Big facts.
And yes, so I would like to, my goal is to help some of you out there, people that are listening, who are interested in starting podcasts and coming up under the Ivy Multimedia umbrella. I want to produce your shows because, you know, I mean, I've been producing in radio for 20 years. So now I'm in the podcast space. So, you know, that's what I want to do. I want to help you all out there. and like, to be honest with you, I can't tell you how many times I've been invited to a meeting, and it's always with a man, and they sit me at the table, they show me their presentation, and they want me to come up under their umbrella. And I'm like, no, like everything they just showed me, I'm doing that on my own. Like, I can't see what you're going to do for me differently. And that goes back to what Dominic mentioned about your Spotify's, Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan had this $100 million deal with Spotify, but I'm hearing he's not too happy with that deal with Spotify anymore, only on the fact because he's exclusive to Spotify. So when you think about exclusivity, right? Mm-hmm. So if you sign up under somebody, you belong to them in some kind of way. You can't do what you used to do anymore because you are tied to them. So those are some of the things you have to think about when you do sign with these major corporations. There have even been contests that we've thought about participating in, but when you read the fine details, if you win, you are a slave to us. Like, you have to read the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that look good ain't good. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of podcasters going forward are choosing to be independent, because if you stay hard at work at it, you can grow your own brand. Do you hear me? Like Spotify's are cool. Amazon recently, our podcasts are on Amazon Prime right now, Amazon Music. They've gotten into the podcasting game. Like, those are cool, but think of what's going to change for you. Can you be yourself still? Can you do what you did prior to getting with them? You know, think of the long term and the long game in this podcasting space. I agree with Dominic, as I know it's going to continue to grow because everyone is tuned in now with your celebrities, with your influencers. So you guys better get started now. Come on under the Ivy Multimedia umbrella. So that's why I'm at it.
Yeah, no doubt. Let me jump in, and because Ina makes tremendous points and Dominic made tremendous points. So for me, along those lines of, that spirit of ownership, right, that Ina was kind of speaking of. So for me, it's to continue to grow in that ownership space. Dominic and I working on, the Binge, and what Ina said was kind of that conversation Dominic and I had early on with the Binge was that, not, coming in and as being, the conglomerate over others, and that's why I love what Ina said, that it's helping others launch their platform and their voice, right? And being a resource to that. And, that's what was spoken to earlier, was that the fact that when companies and corporations come in, sometimes they stymie ownership, right? Yeah. They'll give big bags, right? But then that big bag comes with the cost of limiting ownership. And that's, something that podcast was really built on, is that free flowing ownership. And so, like, when people listen to my podcast, and sometimes they ask me, well, why don't you have this long, spend 20 minutes, reading out ads and all that type of stuff. What I figured out is, I've leveraged partnerships with my guests to become equity partners in companies. So, for example, I'm an equity partner in a company called Leverage. That's leveragecalc.com. And it's software for lending, right? And it works with real estate professionals and business professionals. So, when I talked with him, it wasn't about, I guess really reading off his script in my shows, and having a commercial. Those are all great ways to monetize. Like Dominic said, the way I monetized was becoming a partner. I said, no, I want to be an equity partner in your company. So now I have an 8% stake in a startup software company that I've had now for a few weeks. And so that's the mode that I want to go in. And so someone commented about Joe Budden. Joe Budden, had the whole issue, and he made some episodes and some color around the whole Spotify thing. But that's one of the things that he talked about was, they as you become one of these corporations, they stymie that, but then they place these restrictions, and now you have to read off companies that you may not even really endorse,
right?
May not really be messing with you on the podcast, other than to use you, right, to promote their business or whatever they have. And so I think for me individually, as I transition this to Memphis and then beyond, it's keeping that ownership piece. And I encourage podcasters to keep that, even though someone may give you a big bag, and it's always tempting to take the big bag. And I don't tell anybody not to get their money, but don't forget, why you got into it, that spirit, that soul we talked about, and the opportunity that if you put in the work, like Joe Rogan, it may take time. People look at Gary Vaynerchuk and all. They didn't just come in overnight. These are people that they were in social media from the very beginning. They were working. They worked. Stephen A. Smith or whatever. These are guys and girls. Molly, that's on the First Take show on ESPN. These people have been working, a lot of times behind the scenes for a long time. And so, I want to be able to do that, but I want to do more equity partnerships. And leverage that with my guest. Memphis, real quick, I think, it's already kind of been said, Memphis and podcasting as a whole. There have been talks about podcast unions, and that sort of thing. And so, we'll see kind of, where that ends up going. But I really think that Memphis, like it's been said, has the talent. It's just about coming together. And Dominic mentioned Atlanta. That's one of the things that they did that separate them from New York rap. Right. So New York rap at that same time, everybody was jousting who was the king in New York after Biggie Smalls died, and Jay-Z comes up. Everybody starts coming up, but they're all beefing with each other. In the meanwhile, everybody in Houston and Atlanta, like you said, is working together. And so Memphis has that challenge of, can we get past, not to say we have this, but, get past the ego and the competing of, what we're doing. I know people from the outside might have looked at me and Dominic and felt like we were in an arms race for episodes, right? Because we drop episodes, we kind of do things. We're kind of in this same kind of space. But the great thing is Dominic and I have a unique way of how we operate our shows, and we can operate in that same space. Ina too, Parrish, we can operate in that same space and not step on each other's toes and be great in it and accomplish our goals. And I think when we realize that versus when we have limited resources, sometimes makes us compete, right? And we get into this arms race. Then we watch people to see, if they're better than me and how they stack up rank.
You're so crazy doing that.
Yeah, you will. Exactly. You definitely will. And so I think Memphis, we have to get past that. And then podcasting as a whole, again, it's the ownership piece and what that looks like as corporations get in, the bags get bigger and they start trickling the bags down, right? Like Dominic said, they're giving them to celebrities now, but there's going to be a time that's going to come where they'll start coming to some of us and some of you with larger bags, right? And it's going to be, how do you keep your soul?
Okay.
For sure.
Don't say it out.
Checks are nice, but equity is better. Equity outranks checks every day, all day.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. All right, Sharkey, what's next for the Let's Be Real podcast?
So spin-offs, similar to what y'all are doing at IV Multimedia, similar to what y'all have done with the Binge podcast. We kind of already started with Let Me Be Real. It's like a midweek segment. Anytime like something big happens, it can just be one person, or it can be, however many up to how many people can get on it at the time, because we understand schedules and stuff. And different things like, okay, I'm a Titans fan. And on the podcast, we're doing all like the big time things, big time sports, but I'm the only Titans fan. We talk about the Titans then and there, but it's not often, right? I probably won't talk about it more. So I plan on kicking it off by doing a spin-off about just the Tennessee Titans with just me. And like I said, we got Steelers fans. They might want to do one. Got Panthers, got a Cowboys fan, and Sheedy. Like, so it, no. Let me show you what Tim said right here.
Unfortunately.
Well, Tim said something else. So, IG series. We started off our IG series called Teaching Sheedy How to Be a Memphian. We have So during our live shows now, we have a pregame segment before the actual show starts. And it's pretty much she always come with some random topic. Like last week he said something about what the word slick means, you know. In Memphis. From Ohio, they don't really eat rotel, where they call it cheese dip. So we got to argue with him on that. So it's just different things like that. So like the SunAh podcast and also the IG series. So that's one of the IG series. We might come up with different ones coming forward.
Mm-hmm. I love this idea of the spinoffs that are really still based in what your brand is, right? It's just expanding the brand in different ways, whether it's different topics or through different platforms. And that just goes to show how much space there really is in the podcast world, where you can have multiple shows, different topics. We're all here from Memphis and in Memphis, but there's still more than enough space for all of us to have our podcast and have our own distinct spin on it. So there is no competition. It is a situation where all of us can still get our own bags and help each other multiply the bag, right? So I love this idea of us coming together as a collective, which is really the spirit behind this Swap Pod.
And if I could say something else really quickly, when we talk about consistency and stuff like that, you know, we talked about Gary V, you know, and sticking to the theme of women of color. You know, one of the people, the influencers that I really love is Lily Singh. Lily Singh was on YouTube for 10 years. Now she's on a freaking late night show on a major network. Like, come on. Like, come on. That's like, you know, so once again, the power of like, you can still keep your soul and still get the bag.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Facts.
Absolutely. So I know we are getting close to the end of our time together. So I wanted to give each of you a moment to give any last words.
I'll start it off.
Yes.
Being a lady over here. Once again, women, we need you in this space. Come, and we want to hear your voice. We want to hear your voice. I know many male podcasters. I don't know many women, you know, podcasters. So the opportunity is now. The opportunity is here. You know, with COVID, we have all been kind of confined in our homes, learning new things, doing things differently. We are all in a new normal right now. Like we mentioned, we did not mention anything about equipment holding us back. So it's very, you know, something that if you want to get started, you can do it right now with what you have. So ladies, I definitely want to see more of you in this space. And when you start, don't be like anyone else. Just be you. Don't talk differently. Talk like you talk to your sister. Talk like you talk to your brother, your dad, your mom. Don't do anything different, because let me tell you, it's going to translate on that podcast. You know, I mean, audibly, I can hear when someone is being themselves and when they're not, you know, more so visually, but audibly, I can tune in and tune out as well. But be yourself. And ladies, I am begging you to enter this space. That's it.
Well, mine is pretty simple. Don't quit. I mean, I've done it. Keep going. I mean, like once you start, continue with it. If you run to in the struggle, hopefully you run to, like I ran to Dominic. Dominic ran to Roy Rogers. Hopefully you run to that situation if you're thinking about quitting anything you start. And hopefully that situation teaches you that, hey, maybe you should keep this going. So it's all I really have to say. Just don't quit. Consistency is key. That's our motto. Stay consistent wherever you do and keep going with it.
You want to go, champ? You want me to go?
Oh, go ahead, man. Go ahead, Pod.
Real quick, you know, I actually agree with two. I don't like the Podfather name. I don't think y'all understand how much responsibility comes with that title. You know what I mean? But you know, but in keeping with that same thing, you know, when it, as one of the pioneers, and actually we have another pioneer who's watching, Darnell Reed, who had the Memphis Success podcast, amazing podcast as well, you know. But when I think about, you know, when I think about this city and I think about its talent, I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I'm just going to keep whacking it with a bat. The thing is that like there is so much talent in this city. And so my goal is just to create more podcasters in this city. And so if you're thinking about, starting a podcast, please reach out. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a situation where we share our information, or you're on Facebook. So, I mean, you can find us, right? Sharkey said, don't give up, keep going. Hell, just start. If you got a smartphone, you can start a podcast. You all watching on the smartphone right now, so ain't no excuses. Right. You know what I mean? You're on the smartphone right now, and you can literally record on your phone and upload to SoundCloud today. Like, so I don't hear no excuses. But I think that the important thing is just start. You have got to start somewhere. I mean, 200 episodes, 100 episodes, 137. It sounds great. But we don't get there if we don't start. We don't get there if we don't hit the record button. We don't get there if we don't hit the upload button. We don't get there if we don't, to put it on Apple Podcasts, wherever it may be. We do not get there unless you start. You've got to start somewhere. And if I can just add one more point, I'm sorry, I'm a podcaster, I'm a talker, right? So, but be open to the doors it will open. Like, do not be afraid. Like, I don't think y'all understand. When I heard that Ina and SunAh had got to South by Southwest, I was screaming at the top of my lungs like I was going to South by Southwest. That was huge. It not only was huge for Verbally Effective, it was huge for all of us in this city. Because with South by Southwest is going to be like, well, if Verbally Effective can't be the only podcast down there popping in the Memphis 10, it can't be, right? So there's got to be more talent there.
Yep.
The thing is, you have to be open to these opportunities, and all those opportunities aren't going to bear fruit. But go through that process. Hell, at the very least, it'll make for a great podcast episode to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But be open to the opportunities. But most importantly, start.
Yeah.
Just start.
Please.
Right.
I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, I'm taking all this in as y'all are talking. I mean, it's like y'all are speaking to me just as much as the audience. I'd say two things, persistence and adaptability. And that's kind of been some of what everybody's talked about here in their closing remarks. You have to be persistent. Anything that you want, you have to be persistent with. That job, they didn't just call you up just because they saw you on LinkedIn, right? You had to apply, you had to go to the interview, you had to showcase to them, you had to pitch them you. Right. For your business, you have to pitch them you. And you have to do that for yourself. You have to pitch that to yourself before you pitch to anybody else. You've got to pitch to you. Right. Ina talked about that authenticity and being yourself. You got to pitch to yourself, and so, if you don't believe it, no one else is going to. Right. And so you have to believe it. You have to be persistent, and we talked about this earlier, the no's, you ask people to do stuff and they don't do it. They don't show up, even stuff simple, talked about just on Facebook and Instagram. She does a great job with engaging her guests kind of after and getting them to be part of the process. I've had folks, I won't say any names as far as guests, but, they wouldn't do that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, it's like, well, you only get, come on, but they didn't have that type of.
I had a lot of them too.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Yeah. So, but just be, persistent, even when you have that and you don't get, quite what you want. Like it was said, stay in the game, keep going. And then the adaptability, the ability to, every opportunity may not look and feel like you think it should. That's part of personal life. That's going to be part of podcasting too. It may not come in the nice wrapped box with the bow on it. It may have a little dirt. It may have a little hair on it. That sort of thing. But be open and be willing to adapt. And that's something I know we're all learning as we go through this pandemic, is that ability to be adaptable. Sometimes to quickly pivot, and to sometimes if you have to reinvent yourself a little bit. Don't be fearful of any of that. And again, I'll close with what I said earlier. All of you that are watching this, you're the very best you that will ever exist. And, that's something, I learned that early on. I had a grandmother that would say that, and I believe it's true. And so, go through that and keep that near and dear to your heart. And as you go through, you'll find stumps along the way, but you have resources. Those of us that are here, definitely want to be resources to you to help. And but you have to reach out. We can't find everybody, and just think of that. You have to reach out.
Absolutely. So since we are right here at the end, I want to say thank you for all of you all for being here. Thank you to everyone who is here with us on the live, and for folks who are listening to this later. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to our sponsors, the T-Shirt Lab and Rogers Heating and Air. And to close us out, if you all will just let the people know, how can they get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Okay, I'll start off. Find me, Ina Esco. I'm on all social media platforms. First off, new to the social media game on the visuals, I'm on YouTube, the Ina Esco YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel. That's ENAESCO. You can find me, Ina Esco, Verbally Effective, A Difficult Beauty, I Pledge to Grind, I'll Be Multimedia on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. That's it. VerballyEffective.com.
Hey, you can find us on all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at LBR Sports 901. Also, our website at LBRsports901.com, and on YouTube at Let's Be Real (Sports Podcast), but it should pop up once you type in Let's Be Real.
All right.
I guess I'll go. We're Dominic Lawson, the Startup Life Podcast. We're on all major podcast platforms. Basically, we're on the big three of social media: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I should be better on Instagram, but I'm getting there. I'm trying. I'm gonna need to get some classes. I know I'm gonna get some classes from Ina to be better about Instagram. I'm working it out. But I am there. Also, the Startup Life Podcast. .com. You can kind of reach out to us. And also, I know SunAh is probably going to pump up the group a little bit, the pod group or whatever. But reach out to us if you need help. Just need a little inspiration. Need a kick in the butt to get started. Reach out, because I will kick you in the butt, because we need you. We need your voice. We need your platform. We need your message that you have.
Yeah. Definitely dig that. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast, you can go to champronbrooks.com. And of course, we're on all the major platforms, as all of us are, where you can find the Minding Your Business podcast. And so also on social media at Champ Ron, at Champ_Ron_. That's Instagram and LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, probably everywhere except I'm not doing TikTok videos yet. I'll leave that to my daughters and some other folks. I haven't got to that, try to connect that to the podcast, but you can find me on all the social media platforms. And again, thank you all for tuning in, and thank all of you for your inspiration and what you all do. Everybody, Ina, SunAh, Dominic, Parrish, this is incredible, man. Thank you.
Thank you all. So definitely like, subscribe, comment. The podcasts are on all the places wherever you stream podcasts. And of course, since we are all about building community here in Memphis, definitely join the Facebook group Pods in Memphis to help us kick off this community. And then we look forward to seeing you all next year for the second annual Swap Pod for International Podcast Day.
Yes. Woo. Thank you all.
Happy podcasting.
Happy International Podcast Day.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Come on, women. Women.